Today I return with another Essentials video, this time talking about post-hardcore. There are many videos in this series touching on different genres, touching on different types of albums as well, even songs in some videos, but usually what I do in this series, if you haven't seen before, is I just look at a particular genre of music and kind of give you 5 albums that I feel are incredibly important, incredibly essential to that style of music. Pretty simple, right? Well, yeah, of course. Today we're talking about post-hardcore music, which is a genre that really did birth around the 80s time, kind of an offshoot of like post-punk and punk in general, with, of course, combinations of, hardcore music, obviously. Bands such as Dead Kennedys, Fugazi, I feel are like, kind of like that era's kind of like godfathers of this sound. You've also got bands like Wire. You've also got bands such as Unwound, which take the sound even further. Yeah, it's obviously a bit of a niche genre, particularly amongst the music nerds, but it's a genre of music that I do actually really like, and contrary to what some people might think, I do listen to lots of types of music, so I might not always talk about this style of music on the channel very often. So that's why today I wanted to highlight this genre and pick out 5 albums that I think are incredibly essential for you guys to get into the sound of the music. I'm not going to pick the most iconic, I'm not going to pick the most obvious, I'm not going to pick the most famous ones. I'm just picking 5 that might be famous, might be iconic, but also ones that I just truly love and want to share here, which is what I always do in this series anyway. So yeah, stick around, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're liking the video, sharing around, and let me know what your 5 picks would be in the comments, because I'm pretty sure there'll be some missing here that you would want to see included. But I'm sure there'll be ones that you'll want to see here that are included too. Starting with one that I do think would be pretty much on most lists when discussing post-hardcore releases, and that is At the Drive-In with Relationship of Command. Yeah, this album is absolutely blistering. It's absolutely full throttle. It's very much a point in this genre where I think you could argue it got a taste of mainstream success in a way that it probably didn't before. There may have been bands that might have sounded similar, but never really quite were able to break it big. But yeah, to be fair, tracks like One Arm Scissor did catch a lot of buzz, particularly amongst the rock fans, particularly amongst that Kerrang crowd back in the 2000s, and really took this sound to a place that it probably hadn't really seen before. Very impressive to see this band do what they did. Unfortunately, they didn't really release a great deal of music considering how successful and brilliant this album was. They dropped like a 2017 album, which was like 15 years or something like that after the previous one. I think it is a shame, a great shame that we didn't see them stick around. But yeah, honestly, what an absolute album this is. It's just completely, banging, and it bangs your brain, it bangs your ears at all places, but it's still incredibly catchy as well. Like, it's really melodic in places too, and I think that's a really cool thing to combine those 2 elements of the music. It's probably one of the more accessible albums that I might be mentioning here, so I think there's a really good chance that if you've never heard this before and you're not listening to this style of music often, this could be the one that changes your mind, honestly. I would certainly say that La Dispute aren't necessarily a main character when it comes to this style of music. It's not necessarily the one that you might think immediately when you're talking about post-hardcore music, but I do want to say that this album here is absolutely excellent. Like, it is, for me, an essential of this genre. I think it's one that really ushers in the newer generation of post-hardcore music, where, particularly in the 2010s, there were so many friggin' bands that wanted to be like cool emo hip bands, but also had, the screamo singer and the kind of depressing lyrics and the kind of like emo isms that came from the 2000s. And I think La Dispute did have a big influence on a lot of bands that came after it. Not only that, but this album is just completely like brilliant. Like, the lyrics and the writing is incredibly harsh and heartbreaking in places. It is very depressing, but it's really sold incredibly well. The breaks in his voice, the kind of emotional rawness that comes out of the guy's voice as well is just so powerful. Yeah, I think it's really impressive, this album. I think La Dispute definitely deserve a mention here, even if it isn't necessarily, like I say, a main character amongst like the forefathers of the genre, because I could definitely be mentioning bands like Fugazi here and that would be very acceptable. But I just, like I say, I wanted to go with something a little bit different with this video. I wanted to mention albums that really truly impact me the most, and this is definitely up there. Speaking of major influences, though, I don't think anybody would be arguing or getting mad at the inclusion of Glassjaw. Glassjaw are just an absolute mega house when it comes to influence, man. Like, the amount of bands, when you listen to this guy's voice, when you listen to the way he has this really jaunty and off-kilter and at times really quirky and strange delivery, and a really like odd vocal tone in places, like the amount of freaking bands, again, similar to La Dispute, that came after that were trying to copy this or emulate this or really wanting to kind of have their own moment, like Glassjaw is insane. And bands such as like Let Live, I think, are a particular influence that spring to mind for me. Again, a 2010s, late 2000s, 2010s band that you can clearly see we're trying to capture this essence. And to be fair, they're a good band too. But yeah, Glassjaw for me, man, just have this really unique spirit to them that whenever I listen to this album, I'm always just blown away by how little I feel like I can point to anything else. Like, yeah, again, the 90s and the late 80s are an important time for this genre of music, of course, to kind of birth and become what it is. But even then, like, I can't look prior to Glassjaw and think, oh yeah, that band is quite obviously inspiring what they're doing. I think Glassjaw are kind of one of one. And yeah, Worship and Tribute, what an album. I want to mention Source Tags and Codes, which you're seeing maybe a bit of a theme here of lots of 2000s albums being mentioned. Like I say, just going for my own personal picks here, I could do a separate video and completely redo this list and it would still make sense. But, and you know, as by the Trail of the Dead is kind of still a bit of an underrated band. Like, when you think of like indie rock and 2000s rock with that post-punk revival sound, this band kind of took that sound and spun it upside down and also combined it with like post-hardcore as well. And I think it makes for a really cool album, honestly. There are tracks on this album that feel like, you know, you're listening to like Wolf Parade or something, and yet they're not trying to do that. They're trying to be their own thing. They're also trying to have those, you know, harsh and brittle moments like the genre you'd expect to have, but also combining those elements in a really unique way and putting their own twist on it too. And it just makes for a really cool album. I feel, again, it just doesn't have the same love that it probably should, and maybe not as much love as some of the other albums I've mentioned on this video, but yeah, I still think it's an absolute essential. And finally, as I always like to do with these videos, I like to pick one album that doesn't have the same stature or love as maybe as the rest of them, and it is just one that is incredibly overlooked and underrated, but still to me feels very essential for the genre, and that is going to be Avanade, man. It's a Whimsical Afterlife. This is an incredible talent right here. As far as I'm aware, I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure this is actually just one guy creating all this noise. And when you listen to this, and when you listen to tracks throughout this album, particularly track 3, which is one of the best on the album, and the wall of sound, the absolute cacophony that just consumes you, and the absolute heaviness that completely collapses on top of you listening to this is friggin' remarkable. Like, absolutely crazy. This would be impressive if it was multiple people doing it, but the fact that I'm pretty sure, like I say, I think it's one dude doing all of this is very Tame Impala, you gotta say, but still, it's great stuff. It's, again, at times quite heavy going. It's one that you can feel like can, again, collapse on top of you. It can feel a bit much at times, but it's done so well. And again, some really melodic moments too to kind of sweeten up the sound in a really great way. Yeah, love this thing, man. Absolutely love this thing. Be careful with how loud you play it, though. I'm always an advocate of protecting your ears. I'm always a bit you know, self-conscious about that myself, actually. So yeah, just do be careful. Like, some of these tracks do get loud, but if you're a fan of that kind of thing, which I know some of you are, particularly in my comments, yeah, this is definitely for you. And that is going to be it from me. These are 5 essential post-hardcore albums that I wanted to highlight. I wanted to potentially introduce to you if you've never heard them before. And of course, there are plenty of albums that I haven't mentioned in this video, as ever with these lists. You know, I'm only mentioning 5. It's very hard to squeeze in 5 from an entire genre when there's thousands of albums. And I know there may be some, you know, 80s, 90s albums that people would have wanted to see, and they're absolutely worthy of including as well. But these were the ones I wanted to highlight today. These are the ones that I think impact me the most personally. And as always, as I say with all of these essentials videos, it's not just going to stop at 1. I can always do a part 2, so don't worry too much. If you've got your own list as well, let me know in the comments. Subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. If you're feeling really generous, check out my Patreon as well. That would be wonderful if you want to support me over on there, or the membership page. Do have a good day, and goodbye.